Whoa, start with that camera in action. Welcome to another Fred Talks. Today we're going to be taking a look at assessment for learning, also known as formative assessment. And this video series will be two videos. One where I kind of give an overview of what this is and some of the proponents' theories on it and basic layouts of it. And the second video, I will show you how I am using some of these things in my everyday practice. And one thing I have to say right away is in all these things that we're learning in the new curriculum, you're not expected to know it all. You're not expected to implement it all. I certainly don't. There's some things I can't get there yet with going gradeless, no zeros, things like that, getting rid of some of my behavior expectations tied to results and marks. But like all teaching, you take what you can use and that will benefit your practice, and you give it a shot. And what I've noticed over the last 10 years since I've really gone into this in more detail and using it more often is that engagement is way up in my classes. I'm more relaxed, I think, as a teacher. I have a better process because I understand where I want to go. I have a system, a better system. And in general, I just find it, a far more natural way to teach kids. And I wish I had learned it really in teacher training. I mean, we all do a bit of this anyway. I'm sure if you look at this closely, you'll say, oh, well, I already do that and I already do that. And I think this is just a more formal way to kind of explain it. And I think, it could benefit a lot of people, take a bit of the stress off or give you a bit of a boost, maybe mid-career. You want to try something new or you're a bit stale or, I picked this up in my late 40s and here we are 10 years later. I really like it. And I think it's got lots of benefits to it. So maybe it'll help you as well. So I'm going to share my screen again with you here. And we are going to, hello, Rusty. We're going to take a look at basically kind of an overview. And I'm going to kind of compare and contrast different systems here. But basically, using the clinicians that have visited Coraloo, as I pointed out there, we're going to look at three different systems here. Dylan Wiliam has a 5 kind of part system. Kathleen Gregory has a 6, which I tend to use more now because I used it back when she visited in 2009. And Sandra Erbst, who was here last year, has a 7 sort of stage system in her assessment for learning formative assessment process. So this is Dylan Wiliam's. This is from the Dylan Wiliam assessment pack that the workshops at the school have been about. And you see how this is structured here. Student here, peer, teacher, where the learner is going, where the learner is now, how to get the learner there. And you'll see this repeated all over the place. Basically, all of them talk about these stages, but using different words and different stresses or emphasis. Clarifying, sharing, and understanding learning intentions. So the first part is basically in our proficiency-driven curriculum now, what are we trying to get the kids to do? What is the skill we are going to try and work on in this particular lesson or in this unit or in this process? And this could incorporate obviously some big ideas and content. And then where the learner is now, trying to figure out, getting evidence. Okay, what do you kids know about this particular thing? And there are many ways, as we'll show you, to look at gathering evidence from students. Another big part of Dylan Wiliam's is activating students as learning resources for one another. This is where students support one another by any number of ways, teaching each other potentially, by using exemplars of previous students, by using current exemplars, and by, giving critical feedback to each other in a process that makes them more self-analytical. And again, the self-assessment part comes in big here. This is core competencies work, etc. Activating students as owners of their own learning by engaging them more directly in self-analysis. The engagement level should improve in your classes, as they have historically. Anecdotally, I can tell you that engagement in my classes is way up over the period of time that I've been using this system, or using some of this system. And then one of the most important things is how to get the learner there, providing feedback that moves learners forward. And I call this the feedback loop, where there's a constant process of finding out where the kids are at on a particular curricular competency or core competency, and then moving them forward with, whatever assignments, projects, teaching, other approaches, strategies that you might use. So that's the Dylan Wiliam overview. This is the one I use most often in my classes, and as I'll show you in my startup of a fresh semester, I go over this all the time with my students. This is the one from Kathleen Gregory, which I really like. It basically lays out 6 stages, the big ideas for assessment for learning, and I go through this in my startup with all my classes, and periodically to recalibrate during a term, quarter, semester, whatever, right? And again, nicely listed here, learning intentions. First thing, let students know in a language they can understand what they are expected to learn. What are the curricular competencies we're going to focus on today? Developing criteria. Provide and work with learners to develop criteria so they know what quality looks like. So this could be co-created. This could be created by you alone. This could be created by the students alone, and then you just accept it. But the idea is, for whatever assignment you're developing with them, coming out of the curricular competencies tied to the content, we know what the criteria is. What are you looking for? Descriptive feedback is the third one. This is quite common in AFL, where you don't give any marks as such, but you give descriptive feedback. Increase the amount of descriptive feedback and decrease evaluative feedback. So don't put a number on a piece of paper that you're giving back to a student, a digital work or whatever. Give descriptive feedback, comments versus 7 out of 10, for example, and then maybe allow that student to rehand that in based on your feedback. The fourth one is questions. Increase quality questions to show evidence of learning. Dylan Wiliam would call this hinge questions. They're very important in the whole AFL process. They are, in a sense, the big ideas. What are we really focusing on here in this particular curricular competency, trying to draw out the most important question so that kids can focus on that. 4 words to improve teaching. Talk less, ask more. And you have to wait, right? One of the key things Dylan Wiliam emphasizes is don't ask a question and then immediately answer it yourself, or only wait 2 or 3 seconds. You have to wait 10 seconds, right? Let the kids think about it. And we'll get into a bit more of that when I talk about some of my approaches that I'm using. Self and peer assessment. Involve learners more in self and peer assessment. Have the learner become aware of their own thinking. What are their strengths? What do I need to be better at? What's my next step? A lot of the work I'm accepting from students now has to be self-assessed before, during, or after I assess it. And so using the criteria, single point rubric, whatever you're using, ask the kids to self-evaluate so that they can argue, negotiate with you even, what their mark could be. And this is a process to increase engagement. Kids become more tied to their work by involving them in the evaluation process. And finally, ownership. Have students communicate their own learning with others outside the classroom even. And this is, I think, one of the best things about this As the quote says here, our aim is to involve students as far as possible in the analysis and presentation of their own work. If the teacher is the only person giving feedback, the balance is wrong and the students become powerless with no stake in their learning. So in every single one of my classes now, for basically the last 10 years, students have to do a presentation. They have to do some major, get up in front of the class. You have half an hour to an hour and a half to do a topic and teach us. And they have to self-evaluate that. And I find by doing this, often I just sit there in the class and the class takes over in a discussion led by the student at the board, at the screen, at the computer, who is developed a topic and answered a lot of the questions or questions they've asked, and then we ask as the process goes on. So this is a very nice system I like. I refer to it all the time, and I keep going back to it to develop almost an unconscious system to develop assessment for learning. The next one is the famous Sandra Erbst. She was here last year. This is all in the handouts. If you go to the new support folder, this is all under AFL, all these handouts. This one I think is also attached to the email. And again, keep these emails, set them aside when you have time, come back and have a look, because there's a ton of information here I think could be very helpful. And again, here's a quick system. Students have a clear learning destination, i.e. the learning intention, the curricular competency, the core competency. Samples that show quality and proficiency. These are exemplars you might use with students from previous years and compare them with the students. And this came up in the Dylan William workshops, I keep major projects for years and years and years in the digital portfolio. I keep written projects, I keep other projects, and then we talk about them with new classes and say, what do you think this, based on the criteria, deserves? Or what do you see wrong with this particular exemplar or sample? And by doing that, by showing kids what quality is and isn't, they understand more about what they're meant to achieve in their own assignment, project, whatever. Students participate in co-construction of criteria. This is a big thing with Sandra Erbst. Have the kids buy in by developing the criteria. And the single point rubric, as I've shared with you in earlier videos and emails, is perfect for that. Students are involved in the feedback cycles. They get a say in what their mark is. There's a negotiation, an understanding of, okay, why didn't I get an exceeding, right? Why did it just meet the standard? Or, you know, why did I get 3.5 out of 4 and not 4 out of 4? Or why did I get 90% and not 100%, or 60% and not 75? And you see how the loop works. Students collect, select, and reflect on evidence of their learning. So this lends itself to the idea of the nature of our curriculum now, which is proficiency based, which is it's not outcomes so much anymore as it is a process of collecting evidence that shows that the kids have met the learning desires or goals in the curricular competencies. Students set relevant and realistic goals. This is all about, you know, core competency stuff. What do you want to achieve in this class? What do you see with this particular assignment? Where do you think you will go with it? And then again, and very common, students communicate their learning to others. So they show what they've learned by presenting it to others, by presenting it to a small group, even just having a conversation with you in the hallway, or, you know, and I've seen a lot of this going on in the school, teachers talking to their students in the hall about how their learning is going. So that is a quick overview of the process of assessment for learning. And once you get used to it, you'll see that the comparison between formative and summative, formative again is assessment for learning. Some of it is what we all have to do in the end anyway. But a couple comparisons here will show you that formative is kind of an ongoing process, whereas summative comes at the end of things. So formative helps students to learn and practice. You do this throughout the course. You try and identify gaps in their learning and improve it. And you use a variety of approaches to meet student needs. Summative tends to be at the end of an instructional period, unit, novel, section, project completion. And this is to collect evidence of student knowledge, skill, and proficiency. And it's via exit learning products or a cumulative assessment. So this is where you generate the mark in the end. And we all have to do that. And depending on the reporting order, we're all obviously going to continue to do that. But what I enjoy about the formative process is that I have seen through implementing it that my summative results have improved. I have better student products. I have better student results on exams because I've incorporated a lot of formative processes. And you can use exams, obviously, results in the formative process. You take an exam that kids just wrote and you go over it with them. That's very formative. And there are different ways to approach those processes. Another look here is a Venn diagram, formative on this side, summative on this side, for who it's intended or what's going on, and another nice explanation of what it looks like to each person and why it's there, right? There's a bit of overlap, but obviously formative assessment is kind of an ongoing process to try and figure out where kids are at with their learning. Did they get that last? Can we move on? Do we have to retrace or retrack? Summative is, of course, to measure what they're learning at certain points of time and for students to understand their overall performance on a unit of study. And both, right, are ways to assess student learning. Our opportunities to give and receive feedback are ways to evaluate the effectiveness of teaching. And obviously, I think a lot of teachers are doing all of these things. Okay. Thanks, everyone. That's a quick overview of assessment for learning. What I'm going to do now is start another video, excuse me, and I'm going to get into some nuts and bolts examples of how I have been using the process in my classes and give you some examples of what Dylan William has shared with us, and I'll have some other useful handouts for you to take a look at. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care.